2025 Edelman Trust Barometer. Now, it's an annual international survey of how much we trust, us small people, trust the big people, the big institutions, the big parties, the big corporates that make the background and the foreground to our lives. Now, I first heard about the Edelman Trust Barometer when our finance and economic guru, Craig Stobo, mentioned it in a piece that he did with us about a couple of years ago. And it has serious international, it's probably the most seriously international and corporately credible piece of survey in the world, probably right up there with world university rankings, actually. And it's generally presented to the world's political and business elites in Davos at the World Economic Forum. Oh, by God, I've just triggered a whole lot of series of people out to those three things. Davos and the World Economic Forum, which is where all the big politicians and political elites and business elites and multi-corporates get together for their annual retreat and saying, how clever are we all? Anyhow, this Edelman Trust Barometer goes to there and then it gets published. And it's a kind of, to the Davos elites, so how are we going? Question mark, you know, and does everyone still like us? Question marks. And it's been going for a few years now. Well, the answer this week and this year is a resounding no to those questions. We, the little people, don't trust, according to the Edelman Trust Survey and Barometer, the traditional power elites anymore. Or rather, we in the West, in the democracies of the West, don't. In fact, we despise the bastards. And New Zealand is getting right up there in a stick-it-to-the-pricks stakes. For the first time since the survey began, a majority of New Zealanders distrust just about every institution and industry that exists in New Zealand. We don't trust our politicians. Well, we've never trusted them, so that, to be fair, that's not a hard one. We sure as hell don't trust our media, and that's been for a few years now as well. But we also don't trust our public institutions, including councils, courts, and the civil bureaucracy elites. We're not too fond of New Zealand business, especially the oligarchic and monopolistic ones. And why is this important? Because we're not losing faith, we've lost faith in the people, the institutions, the elites that are supposed to have our best interests at heart, and to whom we surrender daily control of our lives and livelihoods. The authors of the Edelman Trust report this year blame, in good part, the politics of grievance, they call it. And this has been echoed by the New Zealand Initiative in a piece that Roger Partridge wrote in the New Zealand Herald last week. That's the old Business Roundtable, by the way. But also, ironically, not just the right-wing conservative commentators, but various left-wing commentators as well, who say that it's all due to power elites and the rich being more powerful and more rich than ever before. And you would hear constantly, in fact, we'll be talking very soon to one of our guests about this, the disparity in wealth between the rich and the poor in this country, and how as that widens, so does trust in our institutions. Now, they're wrong, of course, because we don't distrust, because we also, distrust and despise the liberal and left elites too. We distrust and despise the courts, the Wellington bureaucracy, local councils, the media, the universities and academics, all progressive, liberal and left elites within our society, all with real power and influence, and all, especially the upper echelons of the New Zealand media, with wealth, living in leafy suburbs and sending their kids to private schools. In short, we don't care if the elites in New Zealand are from the right or from the liberal left. We just don't trust any of the bastards. But there is sort of good news. There aren't too many other Western nations that rate highly on the Edelman Trust Index either. In fact, and listen to the lineup I'm about to read out, public trust is much higher in countries that A, aren't democracies. All right? Public trust is much higher in countries that aren't democracies. B, don't have a free press. And C, don't value freedom of thought, speech, or religion. Now, what's the top of the Edelman Trust Barometer for 2025? What's the country that stands out like dog's bollocks all by itself? What country do you think that would be? Josh? Starter for 10. No? Right. The answer is China, Josh. China. More people in China trust their institutions, their politicians, their corporates than in any other country in the world, and by a factor about twice those of New Zealand. All right? So about 76% of Chinese trust their institutions. We're down to 49%.
Well, do they just say that so they don't go missing?
No, Josh. No, listen, don't discount the evidence, Josh. Second, what's the second country, Josh? Indonesia, Josh. Now, it's sort of a democracy, largest Muslim country in the world, very, very highly socially programmed country, but it's number 2 in the world for trusting institutions. It's actually just behind China. And number 3 in the world, Josh. Number 3 in the world? India. So let me get this right. China, Indonesia, India. How much do we have in common with those countries? Well, they are trading partners, at least one of them, or two, about to be 2, and possibly 3. They all sort of live in our particular area, but none of them you could call fully functioning democracies, although India pretends to be, and it has all the apparatus of. But in all of those countries, China, Indonesia, and India, the public, by the main, and roughly 3/4 above, trust their public institutions. Then, let me read out the rest of the list before I get to the first European country. The United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Malaysia, Thailand, Nigeria, for Pete's sake, Singapore, and then Kenya. What's missing from those countries, Josh? Well, none of them are white. None of them are steeped in Western democracy. And none of them have the so-called freedoms that the rest of us possess. Although you might argue that Singapore, Thailand, no, that's all right. Singapore and India have more than the rest. The first European country, the Netherlands, the Dutch, Josh, they come in at 13. The Dutch, Josh.
Not even up there. That's, yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
The Dutch, Josh, come in. And they are a highly structured poobah, not a sense of humour on any of them, very tall race of athletes, but people from whom a sense of humour long ago, generationally deserted them. Very hardworking, but for God's sake, don't talk to them about all those sort of fribbles and frabbles of free speech and democracy and crap like that. They're out there working, digging dikes and eating stuff and running fast. All right? The Dutch, Josh. No sense of humour. That's why they got to import it from Britain. I certainly don't import it from Germany. Now, is democracy in trouble, you might ask? Well, it's not because it's failed, I would ask, and this is where I have a go at Bryce Edwards and the liberal elites, including Helen Clark Foundation over the weekend, who said pretty much the same thing. Their argument is that democracy has been sabotaged by the monopolies, the corporates, the business, the right-wing elites. Au contraire, I would argue that democracy has failed just as much because it's been sabotaged by the very same elites that we've entrusted to look after us. And again, they are not conservative forces. The teachers and the academics at our universities, the politicians and their parties, the bureaucracy, particularly their upper echelons of the bureaucracy, central and local, the judges and their courts, the lawyers, the legal profession, the institutions like the Commerce Commission that are supposed to be protecting us from the rapacity of banks, Air New Zealand, supermarkets and petrol diesel companies, but don't, and have always waved the white flag of surrender at them, and then, of course, the media. In short, democracy is being denied by the oligarchic elite in this country, and guess what? Most of them are not centre-right or conservative voices. Far from it. They're overwhelmingly from the liberal and left elements of our society, the so-called progressive quarters of the New Zealand community. So the Helen Clarks, the Integrity Institutes, the Bryce Edwards of this world, if you are going to analyse something like the Edelman Trust Barometer and other surveys, look at in the mirror, look at yourselves and see why we don't. You run most of our public institutions. You are the oligarchic elite that runs almost all of them, in actual fact. If we have fallen out of love with you and don't trust you, don't try and divert blame elsewhere. We may not trust the right-wing oligarchic elites, but we no more trust them than you.